Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Mark Robbins, and I'm the committee chair for the Connecticut chapter of the USGBC Homes Committee. And this is a beta event for us. This is the first time we've done something like this, and we hope to make it part of a continuum. At the moment, it's the first of 4 such seminars. And the concept is that we'll have a keynote speaker at each event. We'll have a fast-paced 4-person panel delivering high-level information in about 12 minutes. And we'll close with a takeaway, an actionable opportunity for the stakeholders to sign up, whether it's entering into the Solarized Connecticut program or the Clean Energy Community program. And we hope that this will sort of synthesize and create an opportunity for the communities in Lower Fairfield County to become more actively engaged and receptive and appreciative of what's happening at a state level to promote clean energy and efficiency. Our committee, the USGBC, best known, U.S. Green Building Council, best known as authors of the LEED program, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, which is a benchmark for sustainable building and methodology. And this subcommittee was established about 6 years ago by Mike Trolley, and I'd like to ask him to stand up. Preeminent green builder, and that's Mike. I've put your hand up there. He's been leading the charge to build up the committee, and I just had an opportunity to step in and take it over from him as the committee chair recently. The idea we're going to try to deliver in this mini-series begins with breakthroughs in energy legislation, followed by next month, and the rhythm being once a month, the third Thursday of the month, we'll deliver a program. The next program will be here as well. Governor Beloy will be the keynote speaker. And that topic is energy and infrastructure solutions. And we'll hear from the world of distributed generation, resilience, demand response, smart grid, microgrid, CHP, and fuel cells. The third program, and we're looking for a host right now, it's out for bid, either Earth Place in Westport or Aldrich Museum of Contemporary Art, or maybe even Wilton. And that will be funding improvements, performance contracting, and energy efficiency. The fourth program is sustainable planning, assessing environmental health, promoting green development with zoning and implementing change. So I'm going to jump right into a quick introduction to the panelists here tonight, beginning from left to right, Jessica Bailey, and she's running the CPACE program, which is the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. We've got Alex Kragie, who's the Deputy Chief of Staff for DEEP. Brian Garcia, who's the President and CEO of Cephia. And Jessie Stratton, who is Policy Director with Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Jessie is going to open the talk tonight. I'd like to give you a little bit of her background. She was appointed by Dan Esty. She's a former state legislator and Director of Policy Development for the agency. She was very involved in synthesizing in the Public Act 1180 and synthesizing the Department of Energy and Protection, Department of Environmental Protection with Department of Energy. She served in the State House of Representatives from 1989 through 2003, representing Avon and Canton. During much of that period, she was co-chair of the legislature's Environmental Committee. Most recently, she was Director of Government Relations for Environment Northeast, a regional environmental advocacy organization. So, Jessie.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm not a techie, which Alex will tell you because he bails me out all the time in the department. But it is an enormous pleasure to be here, and I take my hat off to Mark and the rest of you who put this together, and to all of you for being here. You know, as a state entity, and what's really exciting about the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is that the state really has not had a Department of Energy for a generation. And when you think about how critical energy is to all of us, whether individuals, municipalities, or the state itself, it is really pretty amazing that this was just a void. And as a result, policy was sort of made in a vacuum, decision by decision, without any direction or concerted approach around it. And what has been really exciting for me and others of us who became a part of this new Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, working with State Representative Steinberg and others to actually create it a year and a half ago, has now been getting it off the ground. And the truth is to the pudding. And I don't know, Governor Malloy was supposed to be here tonight, and in some ways I'm glad he's not, because he is impossible to keep up to. I mean, our commissioner is very hard for us to keep up to, and he struggles to keep up to the governor. It is like, you know, everything needs to be done right now. So it is very, very exciting, but it is also sometimes a little unnerving. But one of the parts of Public Act 1180 that created our department also charged us with creating an energy strategy for the state of Connecticut, something that had not existed. It was to be a comprehensive energy strategy. We worked very hard on that throughout all of last summer, issued a draft strategy in October when the governor rolled it out, and then went through 3 months of public comment on that and received just about 1,000 public comments from over 500 individuals on it. So it has been an incredible process for the state to come together and say, what do we want our energy future to look like? In that strategy, as you can see here real quickly, we divided it into 5 sectors. We tried to be comprehensive. We certainly did not hit everything, but in trying to deal with what were the major energy uses throughout the state, we came up with these 5 chapters. Underlying that whole process when we started were some fundamental principles that the governor and the commissioners shared. Mostly, the goal was to try to create a framework that would help ensure for the Connecticut, for the next generation and beyond, that our energy resources were cheap, clean, and reliable. I will confess that reliable was not there when we started a year and a half ago. A few events in Connecticut kind of put that on the map in a way that it had not been. We also very much did not want to fall into the trap that government often does of picking winners and losers. Let's create a platform that allows other in the marketplace and individuals to try to demonstrate what really works. We're going to make some mistakes along the way. But one thing that we were very clear about was a winner was energy efficiency. Certainly the cheapest, cleanest, most reliable energy you use is the energy you never use. And so without any question, that is the hallmark of the underlying principles of the energy strategy. But importantly, energy efficiency is something that has enormous potential that we had not begun to tap. I was talking to folks from Wilton as we were standing before we started, and sort of saying that, and actually a vendor for them, but saying, you know, people talk about getting the low-hanging fruit, which is what we do with energy efficiency. That's cheap and easy. But fruit grows back, technology changes, etc. We need to keep revisiting that and make sure that as we do energy efficiency improvements, we're getting the deep improvements that make long-term and much more significant savings. Also, and the rest of my panel members here tonight will focus on this, in the past, the state and others have really focused, the federal government also, on providing subsidies, whether it was for energy efficiency or for renewable energy. As you all know, we have some budget problems. We also can't put all of these kinds of very important programs on the back of rates for our regulated utilities. So the idea of moving from subsidy to leveraging private capital by providing enough incentive to overcome the barrier to taking the action, but just that much. Similarly, that really follows on the idea of creating a platform for entrepreneurial activity. So these were the fundamentals underlying it. As I said, energy efficiency, clearly The winner of that in Public Act 1180, the legislature gave us a pretty aggressive goal of weatherizing 80% of the state's homes by 2030. That is a huge challenge, and we also have to just decide what weatherize means. But the goal is to say that our buildings consume about 40% of the energy in the state. So it is the place to really focus and the easiest place to focus on getting these gains. I am not going to go in the other parts of this because each of my colleagues here will go into the specific parts of PACE and financial options. We also do have to do some policy changes to support that, to make sure that we make our utilities complete partners in this so they're not penalized if we use less energy. We need to move to something that encourages you and I and everyone else to use power when it's cheapest, not when it's most expensive on that hot summer day. And so to have the ability to know that. And also a part of this strategy is really talking about starting to benchmark, and it's related to the weatherization, the energy use of our buildings so that we actually know that and we can catalog and move on from it. The other real part of this strategy was really some of the policy components of trying, as I just indicated, to try to reduce our energy use on those 20 hot summer days when we pay a small fortune for it, and using some of the strategies that I just talked about to do that. The resiliency of our grid, as I said, as three snowstorms and hurricanes later, has really made us focus on and that has two components, really hardening the existing traditional infrastructure that has been neglected in an attempt to save money, really, sort of that penny wise, pound foolish thing, and then really saying that in the future, we can't be totally dependent upon this large grid. It's kind of interesting when you think about how electricity started. There was a little generation station in every neighborhood, and that served the people around that. Economies of scale made us go to these huge power plants and enormous long transmission lines, which in and of themselves are vulnerable, let alone to weather events, but to deliberate attack upon them. So really trying to look at ways to increase the reliability and resiliency and/or our ability to function when that larger grid goes down. And Alex will spend a bunch of time talking about that. The one part that's not in the strategy, which is very much on our minds also in a report that's to come out next week, is really looking at our renewable portfolio standard as a state. How do we promote the development of renewable energy at a cost that is reasonable to the state and helps us achieve our greenhouse gas goals there? I will not go into this in any more detail than I just talked about, just to add two components to it. Gas electric reliability. Most of our generation, other than the nuclear generation in New England, is now dependent upon natural gas, which is great from an environmental perspective. It's great from a cost perspective, because right now that's inexpensive. But it also means that it is competing with the heating needs of natural gas. And over the last month, we suddenly saw enormous price spikes in the cost of natural gas because there wasn't enough to feed both our generation units and heat homes. And that is an issue that is very high priority and increasingly a concern about cybersecurity of the larger grid. Other chapters in the strategy, and I'm going to run through this really quickly, I hope, but was to focus on industry in the state. Obviously critically important to our economy, a large consumer of energy, and one that even though energy is a small proportion of their costs, it can often be the thing that either makes them competitive or not, because they have really addressed all of the other things in terms of productivity, et cetera. And one of the things that we need to do is to tailor our efficiency programs towards more specific industries rather than just doing heating and ventilation and lighting kinds of things. And we have focused on this on water conservation. About 4% of the energy used in the state is used to just pump water, basically. And both those systems need to be made more efficient, and you and I, as water consumers, need to be more efficient, because every gallon of water we don't pump, treat, use, and then have to discharge saves us energy. Data processing is a huge thing for the state of Connecticut and a huge power consumption source, and also one that is very reliant upon totally reliable power. And similarly, our agricultural sector has many needs in terms of becoming more efficient. So we are looking to develop programs that address those specific industries. We're also working with UConn and the Department of Economic Development to develop hubs that will really focus on helping those businesses become more competitive and really looking at new technologies in battery tech, storage, et cetera. Another major component, and probably one of the most talked about of the strategies, is really trying to take advantage of what has occurred in the natural gas marketplace. For basically my lifetime, natural gas and oil tracked each other. One time one was more expensive than the other and vice versa. With the economic extraction of shale gas through new hydraulic fracturing techniques, gas has suddenly become far less expensive, half to a third the cost of oil for heating purposes. And Connecticut is far behind most of the Northeast in terms of utilization as gas as a resource. Only 31% of our homes use it for heating. So a major focus of the strategy is to bring the economic advantage found in using natural gas for heating to as many customers in the state that it is economically feasible to do that. The first category of those are 220,000 customers who actually are on gas mains but don't use it for heating. That's a no regrets strategy. The second category is those who are close to mains, but it will require some infrastructure investment and extension of mains. But if you do that, just even if we got all of those 300,000 plus customers onto natural gas, we still have about half the state that's never going to economically have gas mains come to it. So again, we come back to the efficiency focuses and new technologies. My commissioner likes to say no furnace left behind, that we will go out and make sure that you have either the most efficient oil furnaces, that your house has been weatherized to the hilt, or maybe you want to switch to things like ground source heat pumps or other more innovative and advanced technologies to deal with that. That part of the strategy is also part of legislation before the legislature right now in terms of trying to do that. We've asked the gas companies to come back with a much more specific plan, and I already had questions about sort of timing of natural gas extension, and I think that's on many people's minds when you know that's in your town. What the strategy has directed the utilities to do is to come back to the department and the Public Utility Regulatory Authority with a very specific plan on where, I mean, and this is very specific, town, streets, etc., those extensions would occur sequentially to enable the most cost-effective extension of those gas mains and hookups. In addition, the governor has proposed that there be a limited duration tax credit offered to encourage people to sign up for that conversion so that we can, number one, get a sense of where people really want to do that, and also then coordinate or integrate that into the planning process. So if we know that neighborhood with 30 homes is all ready to go, we'll go there rather than this neighborhood of 30 homes where there are only 2 people that want to do it. So hopefully that will make this process an integrated one moving forward. There are other benefits in addition to just the cost benefits to those consumers. There are significantly lower emissions of criteria pollutants and greenhouse gases from natural gas. We also get the construction jobs of people doing those gas main extensions, which certainly would be beneficial to the state at this point. The last section of the strategy deals with transportation. Transportation is probably the most difficult thing for us to get at in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We like our cars, as we noted driving down the Wilbur Cross Parkway tonight. But we are looking for ways, working with the Department of Transportation, to build on the major infrastructure investments that the state has already made in upgrading Metro North and upgrading the New Haven to Springfield rail line, the busway from Hartford to New Britain, and trying to focus our efforts as a state in terms of development opportunities on communities and transportation options around those transit-oriented centers. In addition, as you probably know, the federal government regulates miles per gallon standards, efficiency standards for automobiles, and they have laid those out going out to 2025. But the difference of jump-starting and, in a sense, encouraging and educating our residents to buy the most efficient vehicle in whatever class of vehicle you're looking for, whether it's an SUV or a Mini, would jumpstart and get those benefits to the state in terms of emission reductions, to say nothing of gasoline savings, et cetera, for the person driving that car. So we will be working on an effort to really educate people about the most efficient choices within the transportation sector. I would be remiss, however, I didn't add to that that has a problem to it too, because as we use less gasoline, we generate less revenue for the state. And it is the revenue from the gas tax that supports that infrastructure development that we're talking about. So one of the huge challenges for the state moving forward, and many of you are probably aware, particularly since you live in this part of the state, of the discussions at the Capitol right now about tolls, et cetera. But we do have to come up with a sustainable source of funding for our transportation infrastructure going forward. The other thing that we are doing as a department really is working on the rollout of a platform to support alternative vehicles, non-gasoline powered vehicles. And we will be offering in the very near term rebates or incentives, whatever you want to call, cost sharing formulas to municipalities to install electric vehicle charging stations. We are looking to develop a program that would help fund the purchase of dedicated natural gas fleets in a few municipalities as a pilot project around the state for dump trucks and that sort. And being Connecticut, we will always be there for the fuel cells. So in a sense, as I said, transportation, I think, is the most difficult one to come up with strategies that we control. Much of it is federal, and we can do education and try to provide incentives around it. In closing, the strategy dealt with many, many things. Some of them require legislative action. Most of those bills are currently being considered by the legislature. It also involves developing a lot of tools internally, and Brian is going to talk about the financing ones. I already spoke about the alternative vehicles. We have in place a process for developing the efficiency plans for the state. We are trying to really ramp up, almost double the investment in efficiency. I saw Pat McDonald from UI here, who runs those programs for UI. That is an enormous opportunity for the state. And so there are some bills before the legislature to try to clarify some of those. When I talked about no furnace left behind, we do have a fundamental problem. All of our efficiency programs now are funded by a small charge on our natural gas and our electric bills as regulated utilities. Oil companies are not regulated. There is no contribution from the oil customers to doing efficiency. We have done what efficiency we've done for oil customers, and I am one, over the past many years through federal recovery funds and through funds that we receive from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. But those funds are not sufficient to do what we need to do. Alex is going to talk about the legislative changes with regard to virtual net metering, and I flipped my slide, so I don't know what the last one was there. Other major initiative in the governor's bill is really related to, I talked about weatherization of homes. The other part of that is really trying to start to benchmark commercial and industrial buildings so that when tenants lease those, they have some sense of what the energy costs are going to be to occupy those buildings, also as an incentive to the owners of those to do the improvements to make their buildings more marketable. Last part of this is things that the regulatory authority itself will do. We have charged the chair of that, Arthur House, who used to work for the National Security Administration, so he's a good person to be doing this, with developing a plan and strategy for the state on cybersecurity, and they will be the ones overseeing the very specific portions of the natural gas rollout. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessie. I appreciate that. And just to be true to form, in connection with our invitations tonight, we did start a little bit early. I'm trying to keep it to 60 minutes. But we build this event as a VIP opportunity to connect with the state legislators, selectmen, commissioners, and community stakeholders. And I see a couple empty seats up here, which were reserved for legislators. And I believe I saw Representative Tom O'Day here. I want you to know we do have a seat for you up front. Even though I'm holding the mic, you and I are no longer in a debate, so I want to be generous tonight. And again, Governor Malloy will be here. He is going to be one of our 4 keynote speakers, but he'll be here on March 21st. And so that's the next forum on energy and infrastructure solutions. So with that, I would like to introduce Brian Garcia. As I mentioned, he's President and CEO of Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority, and the nation's first state-level green bank. Brian oversees efforts to attract and deploy capital to finance clean energy goals for Connecticut. Prior to rejoining CEFIA in 2011, Brian was Program Director for Yale Center for Business and Environment, and Brian led efforts to develop a leading global program responsible for preparing environmental leaders for business and society, and that's where I met him. Thanks for coming, Brian.
Great, thank you, Mark. I want to thank you, Joanna and Judy with the Connecticut Green Building Council for organizing this event. It's been quite some time since I've been involved with the Connecticut Green Building Council. It's great to see the organization growing as it has, and specifically around the residential community to see so much activity. And I know Mike, who was very instrumental in the early days of getting this committee off and running. It's great to see the activity that's happening. And to be here at Wavenley Park, what a great facility to be having this discussion. I'm going to provide an overview of Connecticut's Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority, formerly known as the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund. Anybody here know what the Connecticut Clean Energy Fund was? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a bit about how it was repurposed into Connecticut's new Green Bank. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the residential sector, and Jessica Bailey is going to talk about commercial and industrial property assessed clean energy. So as Jessie mentioned, working with and for the governor to launch this new initiative, it's very intense. The expectations are very, very high, and it's not easy to say that he not only expects us to do more with less, but he expects us to do a lot more with less. In July of 2011, working with leaders like Representative Steinberg, the state passed what I believe was unequivocally one of the best renewable energy efficiency policies that we've seen, not only in Connecticut in the past decade, but also across the country in the last decade. We're going to talk specifically, I'll talk a little bit about what's going on. Alex and Jessica will talk about some of the key pieces of that legislation as well. But every one of us spends about $10 a year to support CEFIA, the state's green bank. We have a variety of programs, one of which I will talk about. In the prior decade of the 2000s, the former Connecticut Clean Energy Fund invested $180 million to attract about $180 million of other people's money. So about $360 million went in to supporting the foundation for creating a renewable energy market in here in Connecticut over the 2000s. Now I can say that our goal going forward and what the governor is expecting of us is significant multiples more of contributions from the private sector on top of what ratepayers are contributing. So our board is constantly talking about 5-10 time multiples on top of the 1-to-1 that we've seen historically in the past, and we're going to be doing that through financing, and I'll talk specifically how we're doing that in the residential sector. So the legislature, in passing the Public Act 1180, provided a whole new set of tools for CEFIA to operate by. Historically, we provided about 85% of the ratepayer resources that you contributed to subsidies or incentives to support renewable energy deployment on your home or in your business. The other 15% went to some equity investments, some loans. Over time, what we're going to see is a transition of those investments moving more towards debt investments, utilizing the ratepayer contributions. And we're going to be doing that through a variety of tools that the legislature has given us. I'm going to talk about credit enhancements and specifically how we're using them to attract credit unions and community bank investments in your homes through the Smarty loan. So I'll talk about that. Alex may talk a little bit about the Leading by Example effort, where your communities can utilize energy savings performance contracts to help you finance energy efficiency and renewable energy without paying anything up front. And Jessica will talk about the financing tool that is commercial property assessed clean energy. So when we talk about clean energy, historically the Clean Energy Fund really dealt with the conventional renewable energy technologies, or convention in some sense. We've got wave energy in here, which is unconventional. But solar PV, all the way down to fuel cells. As Jessie mentioned, fuel cells are an important technology that's manufactured here in the state of Connecticut. In fact, we just provided a loan to a $65 million project, the largest fuel cell project in the world, a 15 megawatt fuel cell project in Bridgeport that we're excited. We're seeing all the construction jobs happening. That project will be up and going in December of this year. But the legislature also said, you know, let's broadly define clean energy. As we heard Jessie talk about earlier, the state really wants to push a technology agnostic approach. They don't want us to pick winners, but they want us to take a look at technologies and attract private investment, give you choice to be able to support the technologies that you want to see. So they've added financing energy efficiency projects to our definition, alternative fuel vehicle infrastructure and vehicles. We have yet to really dabble in that, although I'll talk about how the Smarty loan, if you're interested in applying for it, can help support electric vehicle recharging stations in your home. So I want to talk a little bit about solar PV. There are some brochures going around here, and then I'm going to talk about equipment replacements as well. But in terms of the solar PV market here in the state of Connecticut, we estimate that there are about 80,000 households that are our target market for deployment of solar PV. We currently have about 3,000 households that have installed solar PV, so we're only 5% of the way there. We have much further to go. And as you can see, that will require a $2.5 billion investment to achieve that target. So to Jessie's point, there's no way for us to get to that level of investment without attracting private investment in our state to support financing vehicles to help you install solar PV on your home. I wanted to walk a little bit through some economics of solar PV. I suspect there may be folks here who are interested in looking at solar PV. Within the context of a couple of things, I want to look back at what the economics of solar PV were in 2012, where they currently stand today, and where folks who have taken advantage of our Solarize campaigns are benefiting in terms of the payback periods of solar PV. So we start off with installed costs on the top line there. In 2012, the average installed cost for 1 kilowatt of solar PV was about $5,000 per kilowatt. Today, in 2013, our current average installed cost is about $4,250. So we're at about a 15% reduction in cost over the course of the last year. And that's the result of a couple of things. One thing is we've been pushing the contractor community to be more competitive. We've been stating to them that the era of rebates and the driving of your business through rebates is going to be phasing out over time. We want your businesses to succeed off of the demand that's created from customers rather than subsidization of government. And we are ramping down rebates over time. For those households that participated in Solarize, like Representative Steinberg, who had a Solarize campaign in Westport, we're seeing installed costs at about $3,500 to $3,700 per kilowatt. Now, when you start to look at the ratepayer contributions through the Clean Energy Fund and the Residential Solar Investment Program pamphlet that's passed around here, you start to look at payback periods that are now below 10 years. I mean, when I went to Yale about 3 or 4 years ago, at that time we were looking at payback periods in the 15-year time frame. The payback period of solar PV come down dramatically. Everyone's here probably reads it in the New York Times. You see the issues with China and what's happening with manufacturing the solar PV panels and how they're producing low-cost panels and competing against the American and German companies. A large part of this decline in costs is coming from hardware costs from China. Now we're looking at, in 2012, a payback period last year of about 9 years. Right now we're looking at a payback of about 8 years. And for those towns who are participating in Solarize, I think I have a slide here on Solarize, you have a payback period of about 6 years. So it's a pretty dramatic drop. Actually, I don't have a slide here, so why don't I quickly talk about Solarize. So we ran a Solarize campaign in 4 towns throughout the state of Connecticut last fall. Westport was one of them, Fairfield was one of them, and we had two other towns, Portland, and one that's, and Durham, there we go, Durham was a very, very high performer. And the way a solarized campaign works is essentially a town sole sources a contractor to provide installations to its residents. And for the first 25 kilowatts of demand that households purchase from this installer, they're priced at X. If 250 kilowatts of demand is created across the community, the installer prices at Y, a much lower rate. So what's happening here is neighbors are talking to neighbors, and as more and more people come on board, everyone's installed cost drops. So what we saw in Solarize, which we piloted last fall, was a reduction in installed costs of 25% for those households, and each of the 4 communities that I mentioned reached Tier 5. So they all benefited from low price solar PV. We're starting to see, we're now launching in Bridgeport, Coventry, Willimantic, Mansfield, and one more, it's Coventry is our second round program of Solarize that we're currently launching. So we've learned a lot from this campaign. We're now going to be applying some financing programs on top of it to provide households with low-cost financing. And here's some of the financing products that we're going to be launching in April. The first is a loan product. One of the important elements of developing a financing program for homeowners is to extend the term of the loan. The longer the term of the loan that you can provide, the lower the debt service you're paying, the more energy savings you're receiving. So our goal is to deliver greater energy savings and a lower debt service. We'll be launching a solar lease. This is the second version of our lease program. This is essentially a no upfront cost solution for you, where you pay a price typically 10% cheaper than what you're currently paying for electricity for a 20-year period. It escalates at 3%. That's the first lease product. The second product is you can buy a fixed price lease that's typically priced above your current electric rate, but it's fixed for 20 years. So we'll be offering those two options. The solar lease program is attracting $55 million of private investment utilizing $10 million of ratepayer capital. So this is one of our first major programs where we're bringing in investment not only from a national bank, but also local, state, and regional banks as well. We're really excited by that product. And lastly is the Smarty Loan. And we've been working very closely with Pat McDonald here at UI. He's our partner in terms of helping us roll out this product. The Smarty Loan you could think of as a product that's going to help you not only finance energy efficiency and renewable energy, but also fuel conversions, equipment replacements, and that EV recharging station that you want to install for that new electric vehicle that you just bought. So it is we offer 5, 7, 10, and 12-year terms at anywhere between 4.49 to 6.99% interest rates, and it's an unsecured loan. So the Smarty Loan is a quick and easy process. So we've been working very closely with the contractors and the participating credit unions. We have one credit union that just signed a contract to participate in the program. It's Core Plus. They operate in the southeastern part of the state. We're currently working with 2 other credit unions and community banks that actually operate in this part of the state. So once we wrap up those contracts, we'll be able to offer this product starting in the beginning of April. We're going to have a soft launch of this program. As I mentioned, we have 5 to 12-year terms. The other interesting piece of this is that the credit requirements are that it requires FICO scores no less than 640 on FICO scores. That reflects about 87% of the single-family home market here in the state of Connecticut, so really significant. We'll be working with other financiers to develop products that go to the low and limited income population. You can take out a loan anywhere between $3,000 to $25,000, and up to 20% of that loan can be used for non-energy related investments. Asbestos removal, mold abatement. If you wanted to buy an Energy Star appliance, you can tuck it into there. So we've got other elements of the Smarty loan that we're very much looking forward to launching in April. Now, one of the challenges that Commissioner Esty gave us was to figure out how we can work with the local banks to get a long-term loan that provides immediate cash flow for homeowners that want to replace their equipment. So as Jessie has talked about in terms of the comprehensive energy strategy, we've got a target market of about 200,000 households that we're looking to help them replace their boilers and furnaces equipment. So the commissioner challenged us with developing a product that would allow homeowners to receive immediate cash flow by replacing that equipment. It's going to require about $1.5 billion to finance those 200,000 units. So when we apply the Smarty loan product to equipment replacement, what we see is that the longer the term, the greater the energy savings to the homeowner. So the greater the cash flow in your pocket that you're receiving today. So this is really one of the important elements of the Green Bank, is to develop financial products that go longer, because the longer we're able to go, the more energy savings we're able to deliver into your pocket today. So in the context of, well, those numbers came out funky on the bottom there. That should be 12 years on the last bar there. But the longer you go out, the more energy savings in your pocket. So I'm going to leave it there. We are all, as agencies, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, CEFIA, the Connecticut Energy Efficiency Fund, and the utilities, we all operate underneath this Energize Connecticut campaign. You'll be seeing more and more of it. Our goal is to ensure that we are communicating to consumers with one voice. So as part of this new effort to ensure that everyone has access to these programs, we're focusing our message on around Energize Connecticut. So why don't I leave it there? And we'll move to the next.
Thank you, Brian. We're doing very well on time. We probably should have served coffee instead of beer and wine. This is a fast-paced discussion, and it was challenging for the speakers to actually create this elevator pitch that's really limited to 12 minutes. But thank you for that, Brian. And afterwards, hopefully, we'll preserve some time for Q&A and networking to make this more meaningful for all of you that have come here tonight. I'd like to introduce now Alex Kragie. We inadvertently promoted him to Chief of Staff, but he's Deputy Chief of Staff early on in the billing. Alex is the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection with a focus on energy issues. Previously, Alex served as Vice President of the Coalition for Green Capital, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. He's also had worked on the Obama-Biden transition team and served as Regional Field Director of the Obama campaign in 2008. Alex is a graduate of Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, folks. Good evening. Thank you all for hosting us here today. This is such a treat to be here. It's really something we've been looking forward to all week. I've been talking with Jessie about getting to talk to an audience like this. So this is a real pleasure. Thanks for coming and thanks for hearing us. Where to start with recognitions? You got to start thanking Mark for putting this all together. This is a tremendous effort. These things don't just happen on their own. I know I've organized them before. So thanks to Mark and his team for putting this together. All the first selectmen in the room, the state representative. But I want to give a special thanks to Representative Steinberg. It's a pleasure to have worked with Representative Steinberg on Public Act 1180 2 years ago. And to anyone living in the Westport area, you have a real leader on energy issues and other issues in the legislature. So that's something to really be proud of. Vice Chair of the Energy and Technology Committee. So thanks for everything you do, and it's a pleasure to work with you. I don't get a chance to say that often enough. I am not doing slides because I like to paint pictures. I want to tell you about a couple different programs that the state is putting on. I really want to make everybody in the room see why we're doing this, not only in your brains, but behind your eyelids. This is something that we all have a tremendous passion for, this line of business we're in, and so I want to share a little bit of what we've done over the past couple years with you. how many folks in this room would consider themselves to be supporters of clean energy? Can I get a show of hands? Okay, so we've got unscientific polling says 100%. Good. What we want to see, what we all want to see, is a clean energy future for our state, our local areas, and our country and the world more broadly. We are never, ever, ever, ever going to get there unless we do two things. The first of these things is battery storage technology. We have to develop large-scale battery storage technology so that when our large-scale clean energy technologies generate electricity, we can dispatch them in a reliable fashion. Right now, wind blows at funky times and sun shines at, not funky times, but regular times. Not all the time, though. And there's no way to control that. And businesses can't do business on an interruptible source of power. So we have to figure out some way of harnessing that with large-scale advanced battery storage technologies. And I'm here to tell you there's not all that much that we on the state level can do about that. We have started a Center for Energy Innovation at UConn, which we're just about to announce. You all are some of the first to hear about this, in partnership with Fraunhofer, the research entity out of Germany. That's something we can do, but really when it comes down to it, this is a game where there are no M's and there are B's. What I mean by that is there are billions instead of millions needed for the research and development needed to do this. Fortunately, we have, in my opinion, in my unbiased opinion, a very forward-thinking president who has taken the initiative to do that and is going forward with the research and development needed to develop that. What can we do on the state level? What can we affect? How much change can we affect? We can go to the second thing that's going to need to be solved, or else we're never, ever, ever, ever going to get clean energy beyond 15% penetration. The second thing that we can do is to break what I like to call the carbon barrier. We need to be, Connecticut needs to be the Chuck Yeager that breaks through the carbon barrier for the price of energy. Folks are never going to do things that hurt them on a large scale. We can sign up to pay a little bit extra for our electricity suppliers because it's clean energy. We're in the minority to doing that. And that's just the way people are, because people live day to day, paycheck to paycheck, and they're not willing to pay more for clean energy. And that's just the way it is. We're not going to change that. And I don't grudge anybody that. So what can we do to fix that? We can work to create programs that are driving down the cost of clean energy. Everything that we do needs to be focused on pushing down the cost of clean energy to where the price of conventionally generated electricity is, so say coal or natural gas, and then below that, so that we don't have to talk about subsidy programs, we don't have to talk about state intervention in clean energy markets, we just talk about a clean energy market that works because it makes money and it's competitive. And that is the day we're all going to get to. And that is one of the thoughts behind one piece of the program, of the bill that Jessie and Brian, Jessica, and Representative Steinberg and I worked on, Public Act 1180. And this is called the ZREC and LREC program. It's a horrendous acronym, but it is a very effective program. The idea is that this is a large-scale reverse auction where you are focused on driving down costs. So instead of using a program like a feed-in tariff, which is another policy mechanism, where the government says, hey, clean energy community, I'm going to pay you 60 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour of electricity you bring onto the grid. Well, what is your incentive as a business to go below 60 cents per kilowatt hour? There is none. You're having a field day, and you are making more margin than you really need to be making to get by, or else the feed-in tariff is set too low and nobody comes to play. It's really, it's a guessing game. What we did is we created a reverse auction called the ZREC-LREC auction. And what that is essentially we go to the developer community and we say, hey folks, sharpen your pencils, cut your margins closer than you're usually comfortable with, and get your prices as low as you possibly can, so you need the least amount of subsidy, and we will reward those projects that need the least amount of subsidy with 15-year guaranteed contracts to purchase renewable energy credits that are coming off that project. And what that ended up yielding was very successful in its first year. We're, for example, paying in this year's version of the ZREC LREC program 9 cents per kilowatt hour above grid prices. This is compared to 22 cents in Massachusetts and Maryland for other programs. This is compared to insane prices in New Jersey thanks to a variable SREC market and other places with variable SREC markets where you can pay anywhere up to 60 to 80 cents per kilowatt hour. We're all about driving down costs, getting more bang for every penny that you put in as ratepayers. We want to make your money sweat, and that's what we're trying to do. So that's the ZREC and LREC auction. That is one piece that come out of 1180, which Jessie's talking about. It's one very core function of our comprehensive energy strategy that she described. The second piece that I want to talk about is a program that's near and dear to my heart called Lead by Example. It's also near and dear to Representative Steinberg's heart, who worked with us on creating this. The idea is simple and it's not original, but we're doing it damn well because we are focused on success and we are achieving successes. The idea is that you bring down the energy costs in your state and municipal buildings by performing energy efficiency upgrades. This is not money flying out the door, this is an investment in the state's building stock, and every single person in this room owns a piece of that building stock. So hopefully we are doing our job as stewards of taxpayer dollars by making you spend less money on silly things like electricity and energy costs, and more money on things that actually matter, like delivering core services and doing things that the government should be doing. Depending on where you sit in the aisle, that could be different things, but you know what I'm trying to say. So what we've done so far is we've deployed $10.8 million against 44 different projects in state buildings with an average payback of just a hair under 6 years. We are very proud of that, but we have a lot more to do. And that is what comes into play for a lot of the municipalities represented in the room here tonight. Lost my slides here, but you guys know what it said. There is a performance contracting program element of our program. And for folks who don't know, performance contracting is basically the idea of getting money for free. I can't put it any better way than that. You essentially enter into an agreement with an energy service company which finances the project and performs energy upgrades, and you pay for the energy upgrades through the savings that are accrued on your bill while still enjoying a little sliver of cushion of savings that you wouldn't otherwise have had. It's kind of beautifully simple, and it saves a lot of money and it does a lot of good for our greater environment by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and helping people save money, more importantly in some cases, in these times. So performance contracting, we have launched a performance contracting program for municipalities where we have a program manager in place who I like to think of as the handholder in chief, because this is never easy and you know, it's not a walk in the park, but it's not that hard. And that's really what we're trying to get across. We have done all the legwork, the real grunt work behind this. We've spent over 300 hours alone with the Attorney General's office, and I can tell you that is just as fun as it sounds. We have spent over 300 hours alone with the Attorney General's office working out a standardized template set of documents so that we don't have to go project by project. And these have been pre-approved by all the state agencies you could ever think of in state government. And they're meant to give municipalities the assurance and the peace of mind to know that they're getting a good deal when they're entering into a performance contract, because that's not always guaranteed. So our program is meant to provide that guarantee, and we stand behind it 115%. The other element of Lead by Example is we're doing energy monitoring in state buildings, which essentially is we're finding all these little inefficiencies and little abnormalities in the operations of state buildings, and we're squeezing them out and grinding them into dust by identifying them and taking measures to mitigate them. The classic example, it's never as easy as this, but the classic example is you look at the energy consumption that's being used, you do an analysis, and you find out, lo and behold, you're leaving all your buildings on Sunday and you're in a school building that operates Monday through Friday. That doesn't make sense. So you don't do it anymore. And you save a lot of money for the taxpayers, and that's what we're all about. That's really the last element of our Lead by Example program. And then there's one more piece that I want to touch on if you guys will indulge me for a little bit more. It's our microgrids program. It's the more reliable part of our cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable charge that we've been given by this governor, who, for the record, is just as scary as everyone says. But he gets things done, I'll give him that. This microgrids program, some of you in the room are competitive in it, is a new idea. And it's quite exciting to be a part of. And it's also very difficult. And the reason is because it's never been done before. This is the first time that we've ever done any sort of microgrids program on a statewide level anywhere in the country or the world, as far as I know. Unless somebody's hiding something from me, I don't think they are. This microgrids program was done because we got whacked. I don't have to tell anyone down here. We got whopped by any number of storms. And I'll just use, we had the blizzards in 2011, but Tropical Storm Irene and then Storm Alfred, that ridiculous snowstorm, left so many people hot, sweaty, and cold in some cases, indoors without power for up to 8 days. I don't have to tell anybody here. I'm sure there's one or two or maybe more people who experienced that in this room. And so what usually happens in these situations is there's a great outcry. Everybody gets very angry and pitchforks are brandished, and then 6 months later, nothing ever happened. Everybody just goes back to normal and we don't even talk about it anymore. The governor made very clear that this was not going to be how we did business. The governor wanted a long-term, innovative solution to this problem. And what is our problem? You have to identify your problem before you can solve it. We want to provide greater safety and quality of life for residents in a severe outage situation when the grid goes down. So we created this microgrids program. And the idea behind this program is that when the larger grid goes down, there is a small portion of critical facilities that has been islanded, as they call it in the industry, and is maintained having power when the larger grid goes down, so that you can provide support services, police, fire, a warming shelter, any number of critical facilities. There are hundreds of different kinds that we received in this program. But that's the basic concept behind it. And so we started this microgrids program, and we didn't know how it was going to go. And we had a point of discovery on January 3rd when we had the results for our first round come in, and we got 36 really strong applications from across the state. And I know there's even more out there. There's a lot of interest in this microgrids program because this is something new and innovative, and it's a service that can be provided by government to its residents and citizens in a severe weather situation, or even, God forbid, a terrorist attack situation. So this is something that can deliver real results to folks living in real communities. We've moved on, and we've just announced that 27 of the 36 projects are going to be moving along to the next phase of the program. When the dust settles, I imagine we'll have somewhere between 10 and 12 microgrid projects that we have funded through this program that are operating continuously. And the governor is confident enough in this program to have requested an additional $30 million of funding in his new budget cycle for the microgrids program. So I don't think this is the last you're going to be hearing of it, this particular round. I've prattled on for too long, but I just want to wrap up by saying thank you again for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking an interest in what not everybody has the guts to sit through on a Thursday night. So we appreciate you being here. We appreciate your interest. And please ask Jessie all the hard questions. Good night.
Thank you, Alex. Before you get too comfortable and before I introduce the magic source of capital that you alluded to, Jessica Bailey, I want to ask you to come back up for another 96 seconds. I promised the audience that we would offer a self-help opportunity in each of these sessions. And I was hoping you could speak a little bit about the Clean Energy Communities Program.
Oh, sure.
We have legislators, executives here from New Canaan and Darien tonight, and last I checked, neither of them are shaded green on your map. So maybe you could speak about
I would love to.
Clean Energy Community Program, and then we'll go to Jessica.
Great. Well, I mean, there are a couple of takeaways that we can really act upon in what we're talking about here. One of them is the Clean Energy Communities Program. And you can sign up to be a clean energy community and pledge to hit certain reductions targets in your energy use and ramping up in your clean energy commitment. And it's a very important program. I would encourage strongly everybody who's not in the program to please ask me and Brian about how you can participate. The performance contracting program that I mentioned is another incredible opportunity for municipalities. And this is something we really want to engage on. And Mark, you're absolutely right. This is not just me talking, this is a engagement, and this is an opportunity for the municipalities and tenants. So I would love to follow up with myself and members of my team on the performance contracting element. And ZREC, LREC, you can bid in any time with any developer that you choose to work with. So this is, and microgrids as well in these subsequent rounds. So this is not a telling event. This is a showing, telling, and come, the water's warm. We've got some great programs, and we're thrilled to have some leaders here in their communities, and so we would love to have you join us in these programs.
Great. So now I think I've proven to you all that we've assembled a rarefied brain trust tonight. And so we wanted to close with a local celebrity. And so we're dialoguing, who do we know that lives in one of these towns? Is it Paul Simon? Is there a sports star, a financial mogul that would be willing to step up to this billing? And we came up with Jessica Bailey, who has been with the state, I think, less than 2 years.
Oh, less than 6 months.
Less than 6 months, and knows more people than most of the legislators do. She is the program director for CPACE, the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, under Brian Garcia's CEFIA institution. And before that, she was Sustainability Program Manager for Rockefeller Brothers Fund in New York City. So, Jessica Bailey.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark. I thought he was being nice. I wrote all that down for him to say. Let me see if I can pull up my slides here. All right, well, just to add my thanks to the organizer of the event, it's really tremendous to see this much interest. I'm thrilled. It is not every day that you can find a group of folks that will sit for 2 hours and listen to somewhat arcane energy policy for the state of Connecticut.
Speak for yourself.
We're the four. I didn't think I was going to show up. But we're still here, and I'm local. I live in row 8, and so this is great. I love to do the evening events close to home. My 4-year-old loves it as well. So thanks for having me. I am going to talk about property assessed clean energy. You've heard it alluded to a couple of times. We call it CPACE, and CPACE is meant to signify that it is a commercial, industrial, and multifamily financial product that building owners in the state of Connecticut can now access. So how does it work? Essentially, a building owner that wants to do energy upgrades in their building can now access 100% upfront, long-term, low-cost financing to do qualified energy upgrades in their building and repay that capital through an assessment on their property tax bill. This benefit assessment, just like a sewer assessment or a sidewalk assessment, it sits in a senior lien position on a mortgage, and the building owner pays it off every 6 months when they pay their property tax bill. Now, those of you in finance, and I'm sure there's a few being in Fairfield County, heard me say senior lien. What this does for this financial product is it makes it secure. It moves energy lending from unsecured, read high cost, to secured, read low cost. So what we've done here in Connecticut is created a way for building owners to access capital using a system we already have in place to access the capital to do the energy upgrades they want to do. So that's it in a nutshell. So why did we do it? This was policy that was passed 1.5 years ago, and I'll talk a little bit about the details of the policy, but it wasn't easy to get it passed, so why did we bother to do it? Here are the big barriers according to Johnson Controls, or actually it's according to IFMA. Johnson Controls and IFMA, of why commercial real estate owners don't do more energy upgrades. We hear this all the time, that there's $100 bills lying on the floor, we should all do these energy upgrades, but no one really does them. And the reasons they don't do them are right there. The big one, of course, being lack of capital. Essentially what CPACE solves is the lack of capital, because now there's no excuse for a building owner to say, I don't have the money to do it, or I don't want to use my money to do it, I'd rather use my money to do other things. We now have the money for them. The insufficient payback, the uncertain savings, the technical expertise, the split incentives, which is to say owners who've got tenants in their buildings don't like to do these upgrades because they're not going to see the savings. It solves for that too, because it's a property tax assessment that they can pass on through. So we solve for most of the big barriers to commercial real estate owners doing energy upgrades with this. Connecticut was not the first state to pass this policy, I'm afraid to say. It wasn't even the first time Connecticut passed the policy. It was our second go-around. But we were the 28th state in the country that moved on this policy. In my previous job, I spent a lot of time in all of these other states looking at what they were doing, studying what they were doing, figuring out what they were doing right and wrong. And when we came to Connecticut, and with great leadership in the legislature, we were able to pull from the lessons around the country to figure out what was working, what wasn't working, and how should we do it here in Connecticut. So essentially what we did is 5 things. 1, we limited it to commercial, industrial, and multifamily property owners for right now. It may expand to residential at some point. For now, homeowners are not eligible for this. Number 2, we require the consent of the existing mortgage lender. And this is important. When we sat down, when we started thinking about this, the governor and Dan Esty, the commissioner, were very clear that if you can't get the banks on board, we're not going to pass this. We're not going to create a financial product in the state that all the banks throw up their hands about and say, no way, absolutely not, we don't like this. So we sat down with the Connecticut Bankers Association, we sat down with banks across the state and we said, how do we get you guys excited about this? We want your capital in the program, we want your building owners to be doing this, how do we get you excited? And what they said at the end of the day was, keep us at the table. Don't approve deals on buildings that are going underwater that we know aren't financially healthy enough to do this. Put a requirement for consent in, so it's in the policy. We at SEPTA are not able to approve financing on any building that doesn't have their mortgage lender sign off on it. It's a good check too, it's a good gut check for us to make sure that the mortgage lender as well as the owner think that the building can handle the upgrades that they're taking on. The third thing we did is we require the savings to investment ratio to be greater than 1. Which is a really fancy way of saying we need to make sure it's investable. We need to make sure that the energy bill is going to go down by more than the property tax bill is going to go up once the assessment goes on it. In Connecticut, as we all know, this math isn't that hard to do. Our energy bills are very high. There is a lot you can do to bring them down, but it's an important component of our legislation. So one of the things a building owner has to prove to us is that these are investable projects. The fourth thing we did, and I'll say a little bit more about this one, is that we passed a statewide program that municipalities opt into. We've got representatives from Wilton here tonight. Wilton was, I think it was last week that they passed their legislation, a week and a half ago. It was great to have Wilton join. We've got several other towns, I'll mention that. Any municipality in the state that wants to use their property tax bill for this repayment mechanism can opt in. And it's a great economic development tool. Towns across the state are coming on board. And then the final thing we did is we empowered CEPTA, the organization that I wasn't working for at the time, but now do work for, to administer the program. So the Green Bank runs the finance program for this sector. So what are we doing in running the program? We're designing it, we're administering it, and we're attracting private capital. This goes, you've heard before, the governor has a very, very short timeline on just about everything. Dan Esty and I would say Brian Garcia do as well. They wound up and running yesterday. So we've been designing this, we've been administering it as we've been bringing in capital. The big thing in designing it has been bringing in municipalities. This is how we grow our market. Until a municipality opts in and partners with us, we can't finance any buildings in their cities. We've got, I don't know what this is now, 15 maybe? Towns on board, 14 towns on board. A growing list, we've got several other in the pipeline. Any town is welcome to come on. The ones you're seeing up there are big towns that we've gone after because there's big markets there. But some smaller towns where we're seeing deal flow. We're hearing from a building owner who says, I'd really like to do this. Do you mind going up and talking to Durham? Great, happy to talk to Durham. So we bring them on in any way we can. We've got a website up right now where building owners can very easily apply online and do kind of a quick screen to make sure what they want to do is financeable. We've been administering the program. It will become obvious to any of you who talk to me after this that I don't know that much about energy. It's a big secret, but if you ask me what type of light bulb you should put in here to save energy, I'm not the person to answer that question. So one of the first things we did was we hired a team that can answer that question. So when a deal comes into us, we send it out to them to do that technical underwriting to make sure that savings investment ratio criteria is met. If they think it's been met, we think it's been met, the deal can be approved. So what's eligible? Really anything that saves energy from the baseline. Anything that cuts the energy consumption of a building is eligible, and renewable energy systems. So what's not eligible? Anything that can be easily moved out of a building. So we can't finance appliances, we can't finance anything that's going to be possibly taken with an owner when he leaves. And the reason we can't do this is because that tax lien is staying with the property. So we don't want a tax lien sitting on a property and the owner taking out all the things that they upgraded. The opportunity in Connecticut is quite big. We've got 36,000 commercial properties. We've got, we don't have the numbers yet on multifamily, but it's a very, very big market here in Connecticut. Concentrated, as you will see, quite a bit in Fairfield County. There is a lot of opportunity down here. The other thing we've been doing is qualifying capital partners. We're back. Our job is to bring in capital, as Brian laid out. We ran a process, I like to call it our lending spree process. They don't like to be called that. But essentially what we were seeing is deals coming into us and saying, which capital provider should I talk to? Who can I get capital from? And even though I knew people in all these places and I knew they were interested in this product we've been creating, I couldn't actually kind of point them in one direction or another because as a state employee, that's illegal. So we ran a process that is a pre-qualified sort of lending tree process. A deal comes into us. If they don't have any capital source that they want to work with, we can ship it out to this list. This list will bid on the deal. This will help drive the lowest rates in our state. The other thing we've just recently done, and those of you who've heard me give this pitch before, this might be news to you, is that we had approval a week and a half ago from our board to put a $20 million pool of capital in place for construction term and term financing, which means we at Cephia can prime the pump. We can get some of these deals moving very quickly now. What we will likely do, because we don't need to sit on these deals, because the capital markets want these deals, we will likely move them quickly and then sell them down to the capital markets. But it'll give us in Connecticut a little bit of a jump start. There are huge benefits to these three stakeholders: capital providers, mortgage lenders, and municipalities. For capital providers, we've created a marquee product for them. They love this. It's a senior lien on a property, the repayments through the property tax bill, and the technical underwriting we're doing in the state is second to none. Mortgage lenders, after some conversation, come on to like this too. Everything that we're approving must, by statute, increase the cash flow of the building. The debt service coverage ratio is improved on every single deal we approve. The other thing that mortgage lenders like is, in the unlikely case of a default, say a building owner goes belly up, probably not because of their PACE assessment, let's say they go into foreclosure. It would only be the PACE assessments past due that would ever come ahead of a mortgage lender. The same way if you went into default, it would just be the sewer assessments you haven't paid that would come ahead of the mortgage lender. So it's not the whole financing. And municipalities really like this because of the economic development opportunity. In a state where we're losing jobs, we're losing businesses because people can't afford to pay the utility bills in the state, this offers mayors, this offers first selectmen an opportunity to give another economic development tool to keep businesses in the state. The customer is our customer here. This is what we're thinking about all the time, and everyone I talked to before this will hear me say, we need deals. We need people hitting the pavement, bringing deals into us. The more deals we have in our pipeline, the cheaper the money is. It's sort of counterintuitive. The banks want to write us big checks, not little checks, so we need to get Connecticut moving on this. But building owners like this because it solves for many of the problems that they have. One, if they've got a plan to sell the property. A lot of owners don't think of 20 years down the line that they're going to be sitting on a building, and this PACE assessment can stay for that long. This is an assessment that stays with the property. So if they sell it, they're not required to pay it off. This is attractive to them. Lack of funding. This is, as I said, 100% upfront funding. We can go up to 20 years on it. We won't go beyond the useful life of the measure, but we can go up to 20 years. The other thing about this lack of funding, even building owners that we're talking to that have the capital, they like this because they don't want to use that capital for this. They'd like to use that capital to buy another truck, to buy the building next door, to hire somebody else. So this gives them a way to access capital from outside to do the energy upgrades. So the other things I won't go through because I know I'm short on time here, but it solves for many problems that building owners are facing. So how does a town join? Knowing the audience here, knowing many of you are representatives from towns, in the statute that was passed, it says that a written agreement must be passed through the legislative body of the town. This can mean a lot of different things in all 169 towns. I'm learning all different ways towns pass resolutions. In most cases, it's a board of selectmen, a city council, or an RTM. The resolution basically says, we, the town, empower the mayor to sign a legal agreement with Cephia. The legal agreement, which we have done now, basically lays out the roles of Cephia and the roles of municipalities. The role of the municipality is not unimportant, but it's not too complicated. The municipality is really serving as the conduit of payment between the building owner, who pays their property taxes, and Cephia, who pays the investors. That is really the fundamental role. There are a couple of other things that have to be done, like a caveat on the land records. It's pretty self-explanatory. When the lien is complete, you release the lien, but it's pretty straightforward. It really is serving that sort of credit card function of moving money from the building owner to Cephia to pay the investor. So with that, I will stop because I know we're short of time, and I'm happy to take questions and talk to anyone who's interested in learning more.
That was spectacular. So I'm going to say we've got about 15 minutes left before we have to leave the building. I'll try to make the most of that time. You've heard a little bit about innovative financing. You've probably wondered how we were able to pull this off tonight without charging you at the door. So we are going to have to charge for the questions. But all kidding aside, I would like to hear a round of applause for our speakers. I mean, it is a true innovation, and it's thank you for all coming tonight and for sharing my enthusiasm for their work. For me, it's like hanging out with the band, and it's a great opportunity. So what I'd like to do is see if we can address about 5 or 6 questions, and then what we don't get to, we'll have some time to mix and mingle with the balance of the food and drink that's left here tonight. Before we get to that, I would like all of the committee members to stand up who have put this evening together. And I think our executive director, Judy Swan, she might be hiding outside, but I'd like everybody to stand up and wave because they are the ambassadors for the evening. So if you've got any good things to say about me, please let them know. And to recap before the questions, and I know there's some great connectivity here. In fact, we've got Bill Brennan here, the first selectman of Wilton, who has just signed up for the CPACE program. So there's it's already happening. But I'd like to remind you that the intent is to do 4 more of these. And I'm still forming the panel and the focus for the balance of the session. So I'd like to hear from you, ideas you have. But the current program is, again, as follows. Thursday, March 21st, Energy and Infrastructure Solutions will be here. Then we'll have Funding Improvements and Sustainable Planning. And so those are the 4 programs, and there may be a 5th. We'll talk about that later, but I'd like to get to questions. Yeah.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear about so many of the programs that you're all working on and that you have in place. I mean, it's a long list of them. But one comment I would just like to make, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm mystified to hear of natural gas referred to as clean energy. I don't think of it as clean energy at all. I think of it as oil under a different name. We're still dependent on fossil fuels, fracking. It might not be in my backyard, but my heart goes out to all those people in Pennsylvania, New York, and everywhere else that are living with that. So that's the one sort of dull note for me about what I've heard. The solar, the fuel cells, the driving down the cost, the energy efficiency, the programs for residential and municipal participation, that's great. But to me, natural gas is just not a solution.
Could I appreciate that enormously, and I think natural gas is an opportunity as a bridge fuel. I think as you heard us talking, we hope to get to a point where, as Alex was saying, we're talking about, a carbonless energy future. And we are not there in any kind of cost-effective way. And while natural gas is indeed a fossil fuel, there are very significant emission reductions over the burning of oil by burning natural gas. You get a 20 to 30% reduction in nitrous oxides, a 90% plus reduction in sulfur emissions, and about a 1/3 reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. It is very clear the state has a global warming solutions bill in place that requires an 80% reduction by 2050. Natural gas will not get us there. I think at best natural gas is a bridge fuel to bring savings to our economy to help us have other resources to invest in the broader kind of energy improvements and clean energy things going forward. I think I'd also remind you, I pointed out that half the state is not going to have that opportunity anyway. And I'm in part of that half of that state. And I think the other half of the state gives us an incredible laboratory for trying to work on alternatives, whether that be ground source heat pumps, cold weather heat pumps, whole variety of things that are going to have to occur for the long term and also in the short term for part of the state. Natural gas, I do not anticipate, will be the fuel of choice in 2050 going forward. Excuse me.
Please speak up when you're asking the question, unless you want me to give you a mic. Yep.
Welcome to this neck of the woods. I'm from Norwalk, and thanks. I had two questions about outreach. First thing is, I would be interested in finding out what your plans are for the public outreach, including television, video, and social marketing, as far as getting people more comfortable with the technological words in layman's terms. Secondly, plans for educating the city and town staff, oftentimes land use staff, that don't have a familiarity with this. And so they're oftentimes the first people that an applicant may approach, maybe an applicant that's not familiar, not a big corporation, so that they're not familiar with these opportunities. So I'm very interested, both being a member of Green Building Council down here, but also as a former League of Women Voters leader, really want to look at the education matrix. And thank you for being here.
Thanks, Diane.
Municipal, I can do.
You want to get that, Alex?
Yeah, I think we're gonna tag team this one. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, as I said before. I think that you're absolutely right that there is a need to connect with folks in terms of the language we're speaking. For too long, energy-oriented folks have been speaking Chinese while everyone else is speaking English. But I think that we've actually had a major breakthrough starting with the big energy bill we did, and really the way we're thinking about energy. We don't need to talk about specific things. We just need to tell people they're going to save money. It's pretty simple. You don't get more layman-y than that. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. This is about cutting costs. And when you tell folks that they're going to cut costs, they're going to listen. You don't have to tell them anything about you're going to go in and install variable frequency drives on all their, all their pumps and everything, and you're going to swap out their HVAC units. You're just going to say you're going to save $50 a month on your energy bills, and they're going to say that's great. That's as layman as it gets. So that's really how we're going about this. We're really rebranding everything we're doing. We're simplifying it, and we're making it accessible to everybody who wants to save money, which an informal poll, I bet, would also show to be the entire room.
From a general public standpoint, I think there are three specific things. One is, as I was mentioning earlier, the Energize Connecticut, a broad statewide campaign. I mean, just having one umbrella campaign that everyone can really focus in on and talk a lot about is going to be very, very important. We haven't seen that historically, so that's going to be very important. The second is working very closely with community-based organizations. I mean, one of the fascinating things about New England is how strong local organizations are to influencing what happens within our communities. We're currently running with a UI in a variety of communities across the state of Connecticut, a neighbor-to-neighbor energy challenge, where we're working with community groups to get homeowners to sign up for home energy solutions. I want to make sure that everyone here goes to the Energize CT website, and for those who haven't done home energy solutions, you need to do it. That's your first step on the clean energy road that Alex was mentioning. So community-based organizations are going to be very big. And the third thing is on Tuesday we had a forum with the Energy and Technology Committee, and Senator Duff from Norwalk, his final comment to us, to Cephia, was, we want you to go big. And what he was stressing was, come back to us, because we want to see some policy proposals that help us get customers educated and acquired and on this clean energy road. They're very open to ideas, so we're going to go back, get to the whiteboarding, and figure out what types of suggestions we can recommend from a policy perspective, because we've been doing well, but we really need to continue to kick it up a notch, 100-fold upon what we've done historically.
Thank you, Brian. And further to your point, Diane, it is a complicated topic, and specifically given the fact that Connecticut's got 169 town greens, a very fragmented state. The focus, what we're trying to create as the GBC Homes Committee by hosting this series, is a platform to encourage connectivity among the towns and the legislators and these folks that are advancing the policy, because the idea being that the cities have the infrastructure. In theory, they have directors of sustainability, they have master plans and sustainability plans, but it's a lot to get your arms around for a small community. Bruce Hampson?
I just want to piggyback off what was just said. And Brian, I would really challenge you to really do something that I can't suggest because I don't know what the answer is, but truly publicizing all of these programs that do require an initiative by a homeowner to access them, and even now commercial owners to access them. Wilton did a very extensive effort on neighbor to neighbor. The home energy survey is a no-brainer. Everybody should have done that. And still today, in my hometown, I will ask friends, almost neighbors, what is that? But publicizing all of these programs is a huge challenge. And until we can do that with the people who have to take an effort to take advantage of it, it's not going to go. The municipal programs, we've done a great job because we're aware of them, you communicate to us, but that's a challenge, to get much broader communication.
So I was challenging Christopher earlier exactly on this, which is, he's in the marketing space. If there's a space for innovation in clean energy, not only finance and policy, but it is marketing and consumer education, because we're not doing enough of it, and we're not doing it in a way that really reaches the masses to get them to take action.
And for the benefit of the audience, Bruce Hampson is the chairman of Wilton's Energy Commission, so he's also a great resource after the event. Next question? Yes?
This was a wonderful panel coming from an environmental background. This is something I always wanted to have. And I have to confess that I had to come here today to learn all about the details. And just to go back to everybody's point, we need to really publicize it. And one idea I have is to really put a little leaflet at all the banks. Since they are the integrated parties of this push, they, the minute I come in, I should see a little leaflet say, would you like to have your house be more energy efficient? Just like when you walk to a bank, they say, do you want to have a mortgage? You want a financial planner? Zoom, just put a little leaflet there, and that will increase business for local banks as well for all of us. But this is a wonderful thing. Another thing, I used to live in the backcountry of Greenwich, and there was a lot of blackout. Sometimes I felt like I was living in the countryside in Vietnam. So if there's something to upgrade that part, that would be great.
Okay, Laszlo?
Did I miss something? Because I didn't hear about the most effective savings in energy is insulating existing homes. What is the incentive there? Or is there any?
Right.
Very
Good point. I'll let you take that, Brian.
I'm just going to ask Pat.
Yeah, I was
Pat,
just going to say, do you want to Pat is the utility person who has those incentives through the HES audit program, so go to it, Pat.
Not to put you on the spot.
Great question, yeah.
No, he likes that.
That's what I like being in. Home Energy Solutions Program, a couple people mentioned it. You can sign up by calling 1-877-WISE-USE. I'm the Director of Conservation Local Management for United Illuminating, which is not the service territory, it's Bridgeport and Haven area. But 1-877-WISE-USE, you tell them which utility you're served by, they'll get you signed up for the program. $75 copay, a whole suite of programs, and then the auditors will make an assessment of your home and recommend upgrades, one of which can be insulation. And if you're a gas or electrically heated home, there's a $1 square foot rebate for insulation. And Brian's working on a great financing program to help you finance the rest of it. So, any more questions?
It's worth adding to that. There's a $75 copay for it. That is a almost $900 service that is being provided in terms of this blower door testing of your house to determine where the air leaks are, et cetera, and on the spot, that sealing takes place, et cetera, and then the recommendations for the deeper measures you can take. And it is those deeper measures that are going to get us to the governor's goal and our energy efficiency goals for the state to do those follow-on measures.
So we've got a network of 30 contractors with almost 300 technicians, and the technicians are all Building Performance Institute certified, so we've got a thoroughly professional crew of individuals that can service your home. And most people don't realize, between UI and CMP, with our current level of funding, we're in between 20,000 and 25,000 homes in Connecticut every year already. So it's a very broad program, and there's an awful lot of outreach that people do neighbor to neighbor and let folks know about it.
Do you have any consultancy kind of an operation that can be available to, for example, an entire condo complex that's going to redo that complex? They can come on in and look at what, you know, what are you going to do? What installation are you taking out? What are you going to put in, and help with that planning?
Absolutely. So, you know, condo complexes are a great target because it allows the vendor to get everybody at once. So what we do with those is we actually we take a home performance model. So the contractor will come in and we'll sample one of the units. We'll make a proposal for the association. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the whole package. Here's all the utility incentives. Here's your financing option, and we'll wrap it all together. So again, 877 Wise Use is your condominium association. Great place to start. I hook Mark Robbins up for his condominium. So it's a great opportunity. And just want to brag a little bit that, you know, the Department of Energy has the Energy Star program, which I think everybody knows what Energy Star is. Well, we applied for and received for Connecticut for our Home Energy Solutions program. We're the Energy Star Partner of the Year for home performance programs nationally here in Connecticut. So.
Maybe if I could just add real quickly, I was at one of Pat's contractors earlier today. It's a new company that's just launching here in Connecticut in North Haven. They were game planning all day on how they were going to move you guys all the way to weatherization and insulation. And it was interesting just watching them, their passion. You know, so not only are we talking here about energy savings and climate and global warming, but we're also talking about jobs. And, you know, it was just amazing to watch this company. It's branching out and starting, you know, a year's time from now, we're going to see a lot of employees flowing out of that group.
And hopefully Patrick will be one of the panelists in the upcoming session, so you'll have more chances to learn a lot.
Got him in.
Thank you. Jack from Weston, do you have a question?
Actually, what are you doing about the integration of energy and the environment? You're talking about conversion from oil to gas. I think that's great, but we have a tremendous amount of buried oil tanks. And when you do that conversion from oil to gas, you're going to have the buried oil tank that you're going to have to remediate. I want to know what the state's doing in making sure that those tanks aren't leaking, and that if they are leaking, what's the teeth that the state has to force that homeowner to remediate and make sure that we're not polluting our groundwaters.
Happy to. Do these work rather than you having to write? Sorry. You may be aware, actually, back when I was in the legislature, we passed an amnesty program for homeowners to remove leaking underground storage tanks. Fortunately, the very vast majority of residential underground tanks are no longer there. What we're really dealing with in the oil to gas conversions are ones in basement, and we sort of have calculated that cost into replacement. You raise a far larger question for the state, however, and certainly commercial properties and other places, we still have a significant issue of underground storage tanks. And at this point, if one of those tanks is leaking and threatening water supplies or something else, the department does have the authority to order that cleanup. Brian's shop, for homeowners in particular, but certainly under commercial programs too, those costs are something that are financeable in terms of doing that. One of our problems as a department is a very, very small staff that seems to shrink daily, another retirement today, and there are no replacements going on, but is the staff to actually go out and find those places. We do inspections of commercial properties, and there are requirements for the testing of those tanks, but when you get to the residential realm, we just don't have the resources to go out and determine those. So unfortunately, that action gets triggered when there actually is some kind of threat to public health or drinking water supplies or something. Not a great answer, I'm sorry.
The commissioner did ask us in the design of that Smarty loan program that I showed up there. You might recall that the 12-year term on the loan saved about $900 a year cash in your pocket for equipment replacement. We have run the numbers in terms of taking out tanks, and in the 12th year, it still delivers a positive cash flow. Not in the earlier years, but if you take a longer term loan, you can utilize the Smarty loan to remove your tanks.
It's not, removing of the tank isn't what I'm concerned about.
You're concerned about the pollution.
The cleanup could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and has been in many cases. So I'd like some kind of a check and balance in this, so that when someone does do the conversion, that we're assured that that conversion has been done, the tank's been taken out, and there is no leak.
Yeah, I think you raise a very good point that is not a part of what we have been planning, because, as I said, at this point in time, probably 90% of residences, those tanks are not in the ground. They're above ground because that whole policy changed. But I do think, actually, as we start to talk about those conversion things, that having that checked, if it indeed is an underground tank, makes all sorts of sense. And I thank you, because we really hadn't focused on that element.
There's quite a few communities here who are well aware.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie and Jack. One more question, and then we'll wrap up tonight. In the back. Yep.
I hate to be the one that goes back to the first question and pushes back on natural gas again, but while the concept of a bridge fuel can make a lot of sense, we're talking about a substantial infrastructure investment. We're also looking at lowering our greenhouse gases. However, most recent studies related to fracking for natural gas show about a 7% methane leakage. With that 7% methane leakage, we're looking at a fuel product that starts to, in terms of greenhouse gas, be the equivalent of coal, which is actually higher than oil, but is not really where we're going. So I'm wondering how the strategy is looking at the effects of fracking, both in terms of greenhouse gas, and also if we're talking about broader environmental concerns, fracking wastewater, and newly documented and statistically tied seismic activity to fracking, which is providing most of the boom in natural gas. So that's on one side. Then the second thing is I had a question for CPACE people, which is one particular hole in the program, which, by the way, so I'm taking two hats here. One, I teach alternative and renewable energy around the corner at NCC. The other is I'm Westport's Green Task Force Chairman. And so on that side, we're looking at, we bought into the program and we're trying to get people on board, but a potential hurdle in the road is that commercial property improvements are not exempt from real estate tax assessments. And when those assessments come out, the finances for the project can look very different. So I'm wondering what is going on at this point. I've talked to Representative Steinberg, I've talked to Jessica Bailey, and definitely is in people's radar, but I'd like to encourage it to be dealt with at the state level with not something that's optional, because towns really need these revenues, but something that is there as a policy to help drive energy efficiency improvements as well as alternative or renewable energies.
Let me take the second question first, because it's a lot easier one. But there is, and I heard you say optional, but I think in the state of Connecticut, with home rule what it is, the state is not going to mandate that municipalities provide that property tax exemption. But there is a bill that's being heard in Jonathan's committee on Tuesday to allow municipalities to offer that property tax exemption for commercial properties, exactly as they can today for residential properties. And many towns have opted into the residential one. I was talking to folks from Wilton before we sat down here. They are eager for that authority to do it, and I think many towns will opt into that. To your other question, which I think are all very good questions, which we've spent how many hours discussing internally in the department. Obviously, as you know, and I've read the same papers that you obviously were quoting on the 7 times, and methane is an enormous potential downside of this. I think the real goal, and we all know that natural gas has been being extracted for a very long period of time without any focus on that. And fortunately, EPA has started to focus on it. We don't control those wells. The governor wrote to EPA to encourage them to adopt methane standards for what's known as green completion of wells. I personally think the only way that's really going to happen is federal requirements. There are bills in Congress right now where the Republican caucus is trying to pass bills to prohibit the federal government from interfering with states' regulation of mining requirements and things. But if we are a state that doesn't produce, as has been pointed out, but if we are going to use much, I take it back to the nuclear power thing. We have a responsibility for the waste because we use the power. We have a responsibility for trying to ensure that the extraction of natural gas is done in a way that is not creating a negative in the process. So I do think that pressuring EPA, and hopefully our own Gina McCarthy will soon be the administrator of EPA, who I know understands this issue very well, is the avenue to go on that. The second part of it is that our strategy does call for all of our local distribution, gas distribution companies and pipeline companies in the state to be parts of EPA's Gas Star program, which does have a zero leak goal on that. And one of the things that we are pushing our gas utilities to do is to replace the old steel pipe with upgraded pipe. And as we bring new pipeline capacity into the state, which is already being planned, to ensure that the leak detection systems on that are state of the art, and I think importantly in my mind, replace the old pipe at this point. But methane is clearly an appropriate concern. I think it's a federal solution to that, and we can take limited action as a state.
Thank you. And Alex, you want to add something?
Not really anything more specific than what Jessie says. She speaks for us on this matter. But just to tease through the bigger picture question with you, it's a pickle. There's no two ways about it. It's not an easy answer, but we need to have an answer, and we need to do something differently than what we're doing right now. And we would love it to be 100% renewable in 30 days, but we have to know that this isn't going to happen, and we need to have a path to get to 100% renewable, and so let's find the best way to do that. We have to make a move because right now the situation is untenable. So we are taking the best course of action available to us, and I think Connecticut's on a leadership front. When it comes to developing clean energy, I think we have a very strong leg to stand on. Talking about credibility, I mean, we're putting 35 megawatts this year against 2 in our best years previously in terms of clean energy. So we're ramping up by orders of magnitude. We're right there with you. But we have to do something in the interim, and if it can save people money on their bills too while being better for the environment, it's hard to hate that. But it's a pickle.
Okay, one more question on the condition that you really speak up in the far back.
I have a question.
I think he's a gentleman in the back with the red tie.
My name's Philip Carr. I'm a resident of New Canaan. I work for a company called Good Energy. I just want to speak to the natural gas renewable energy issue. I've spent a great deal of time in the Midwest where they have a law whereby municipalities can actually go out and group purchase power for their residents to achieve them the lowest rate. One of the interesting things about this is that, as we know, the price of electricity is very much driven by the price of natural gas. Fracking has, whether we like it or not, driven the price of natural gas down to a 10-year low. The result of that in our bids out in the Midwest is that we put 180,000 households in central and southern Illinois out to bid, and 80% of those households who are not naturally renewable energy type people decided to choose renewable energy, and they chose that based on cost. Okay? So the fracking drove down the price of natural gas. They decided to go with renewable energy credits because of the price of natural gas was low. There's the irony there.
Well, thank you. One last one. This will be it.
Yes, I wanted to ask Jessica, with the property assessed clean energy provisions, is there a possibility that, let's say, a big box store like Walmart or a town hall or a school that had huge solar energy panels and had excess, is there a provision for a municipality to share its excess solar energy with a nonprofit? I understand that in Massachusetts, there are municipalities which are then taking over and paying, giving their excess solar energy to something like homeless shelters or nonprofits that don't have the money to do that.
So I believe the answer is yes, but I'm going to make Jessie Stratton answer that one because she'll give you a better answer.
The answer is a partial yes. There is legislation pending, a governor's bill that deals with what's known as virtual net metering. And as drafted currently, it would apply for municipalities for generation, renewable generation that they own, and other facilities, critical facilities that we were talking about in terms of reliability, and agricultural entities. There is legislation that has been introduced by another member that I think we are basically supportive of that would allow that for neighborhood aggregation, also for net metering. And the idea is that you assemble a bunch of customers, as you were saying, and you charge the credit off against those individuals. All of these things, I mean, these are directions that go with our microgrids, the whole idea of distributed generation. I think we have to recognize that in the process we are really upsetting the regulatory apple cart that was established in the 1930s to support that wider grid. And it's one that everybody says, well, why don't we just do this? Well, we still want that grid there when our solar power isn't producing or whatever else. And so we have to devise a mechanism that has us contributing something to the support of that. And we took a stab at trying to do that in this legislation as to saying that we would contribute 20% of the distribution costs of your bill when you do that virtual net metering. It is clearly something the governor and the commissioner are very, very supportive of, and we would like to expand it enormously, but it does have these other implications for the wider grid. But those bills, I anticipate the virtual net metering public hearings are next Thursday, a week from today, if it's something that any of you would like to come up and comment on.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight and sharing my enthusiasm for the topic. Our next event, we hope you'll come back, is on the 21st, Thursday, March 21st, and we're going to balance private sector panelists with a keynote speaker from Governor Malloy. Thank you.